Yeah. Are you just going to go audio only from live?
What's up, everybody? We're live, man. Sorry to everybody who's tuning in. We're running just a little bit late due to technical difficulties, but that is to be expected when you're doing stuff like this. So, welcome to the Q&A. Welcome, Cory Wong. I'm super excited about this one where Cory wanted to... Basically, he wants to break down how he uses the Archetype Cory Wong to process bass, and I think this one is super important to hear because bass, I feel, is often overlooked. So yeah, why don't you go ahead and take it away, Mr. Cory Wong.
Are you using listen to only, or are you using Zoom also for
I'm using
vocal?
just listen to.
Great. I'm going to mute this other one.
Great.
Because I'm hearing that little slap back in.
No worries. Also, everybody in the chat, if you need us to turn elements up or down, let us know. We set this up on the fly, so we're working through all our technical difficulties currently. So let us know if you need to hear more or less of anything at all. So,
yeah, I have no idea how it sounds to anybody else. And actually, one of the things about bass that I like to do sometimes is use headphones that aren't the greatest for bass, because then if I can get it to sound good and tight in these headphones, it'll sound really great in another setting. So that's kind of a fun little thing. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about just different bass techniques that I use for getting tones and whatnot, especially just with the Archetype Cory Wong plugin, because although my initial intention was guitar plugin, get the ideal thing for me to be able to get my guitar tone, like basically my few favorite guitar tones, like all my favorite clean tones in one plugin. Then the next thing was, well, double challenge for the programmers was to make it sound tight on bass. So I did the same sort of process with them on making everything feel great for bass. So if anybody has the plugin, there is, I'm pulling it up now, if you look in the factory Cory Wong bass tones, there's a J bass, a P bass, there's a wide, and there's a crusher. The one I'm on right now is just the J bass, so I'm just going to show you a little bit about this one. And I actually can't tell, I can't really hear this. Hold on a second. Can you hear that?
Yes, I can hear that.
Okay, so that's J-Bass. Basically, the settings, it's going through the DI Funk console. The cab is turned off because I don't love cabinet simulation on most bass things. I like the upfront DI thing, so that's what I have on this. And then a couple of the other settings. So the J-Bass thing I like for the rounder tone. If I'm going for the P bass thing, this is a Mustang bass, but it's got, I can't tell, I don't know if you can see this. Oh yeah, I gotta fix this guy. It's the old Delta Airlines mod. AKA, I don't know what happened when I flew with it, but Delta had a little fun with it. Delta's great, but sometimes actually it's my fault. I fly with a soft case, dude. Whatever. So if I got this sort of thing happening, a little bit more of that floppy. I mean, it sounds like garbage on its own right now, but I'm going to show you guys a couple things how it fits in a mix. So that's the kind of floppy vintage thing. And then, just so I can give you a tour of my basses, and then I'll show you how they fit in the context of songs. I live next to a radio tower, so you get that you get that buzz. It's nice. And this one sounds really bright right now because I got the action really low. But so you get a lot of that. I just have it set up that way because I was doing some stuff that needed that. But the one mod that I have on this, Joe Dart taught me this little mod. This is what he does. So this is the Joe Dart signature bass. People think that this is like some sort of pickup thing. It's literally just gaff tape.
Beautiful.
Taped over this metal so you don't get that sort of sound. Because Joe picks so hard. All right, now let me take the tape off a little bit, and I'll show you kind of what happens. I'm screwing up my own mod job, but, well, I'll show you. You get more.
Oof.
You get that flappy thing that just nobody wants to hear, right? So with that sort of thing, you just put gaff over it, and you don't get the metal on metal. So it just cleans up the sound.
It's the simple innovations.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, people think it's like some really fancy thing, but it's actually pretty dope because it's not a fancy thing. So
All right, mic turned off. All right. All right, so mic is off. Should I switch to the Zoom? Yeah, okay.
listen to thing does not work for my mic. This isn't going to work as far as that thing goes. So I'm going to talk into Zoom. I'm going to tell you when I'm going to play something, and then let's go to listen to. Because otherwise the master bus stuff just doesn't work.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to talk through Zoom on my UA, and then this listen to is going to go out of my master bus because now I'm in Pro Tools. I just want to show you some of this stuff. So how about this? I'm going to give you a hand signal of a peace sign, and that means switch input sources.
Will do. Will do.
Is that cool? Is that cool?
That works.
All right, so here we go. Here's an example of the bass. Here's just how I get my, this is the P bass soloed out through the Archetype Cory Wong. And I actually have this track doubled. I wish I could share it with you, but I don't know how to do that. So anyways, it's Archetype Cory Wong, and then I do a duplicate track, and I put a Valhalla Uber mod on to give it a little bit of a chorus thing. So it's like the regular just Archetype Cory Wong signal is at unity, and minus 10 dB or something is the wide one. So I'll play a little bit of it for you. This is a tune that I'm still trying to figure out finishing mixing right now, and just a tune that I've been writing. So I'm going to play it for you. This is the peace sign. Let's switch. Did you hear me now on my vocal? Sorry, this isn't ideal for the user experience, but this is what you get when you kind of last minute. I don't know why I can't, like, it's so weird. The user experience is better, though, now than you hearing the Pro Tools audio through Zoom, because that sounds like garbage.
Yeah.
So,
Zoom will mangle all audio going through it, which is already evident. I'm sure for most people can already hear it. But yeah, it is what it is. You know, we wanted to do something cool for you guys, and unfortunately, the technology, it is what it is. You know,
yeah, it's great.
So
it's great.
We're making shit work.
Yeah. So basically, with this track, what I'm thinking is the J bass tone. Honestly, when I don't like the way it sounds just on its own because it's a little more gritty than I would expect out of a bass tone. Like it's not my like no, when I recorded this in, it was cleaner, but for whatever reason, in the mix, it feels better when it's got a little more grit on it. It's got like this, I don't know, kind of weird thing to it that to me just helps make it work. So what I do is basically, that is literally the P-Bass preset with a little bit of gain on it. And that's all. So it's the compressor out of the Archetype Cory Wong, out of the DI Funk console. I don't have the pedal compressor on. It's just the DI Funk console compressor setting. And yeah, it's interesting. So I'll play a couple other spots where.
Well, did you end up using the tube saturator to get that sort of growl to the bass?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
So it's basically turning up tube satch. You got this tube Satriani, and you got the basically. So let me look at it. Tube Satriani, compressor, and then a little more mid action than I would normally do on something like this. But I don't know. It kind of feels cool. It adds. It gives it a vibe. Like it puts it in a thing. So let me go back. I'll play it with nothing on. And then I'll turn the plugin on.
Right.
My peace sign telling you to go back to listen to.
Yeah.
So there you could kind of hear how it was dry, turning a couple plugins on, and then when it goes wide, it's just an extra thing where, I don't know, it doesn't really need it, but it gives it a thing. And for me, sometimes it's not always about the cleanest, most, like the cleanest individual tone, but for me, it's what feels like it has a thing, what feels kind of iconic for the song. And if you listen to a lot of bass tones isolated, they sound weird. The EQs are weird. And the stuff is just not as enjoyable to listen to as like sitting in front of my, Mark Bass 810, which is great, or just turning on the plugin and giving that really nice, clean, lush sound. The reality is, a lot of times the way something sits in a mix, it's better if it has a little bit of a different thing on it. So I'm going to pull up another set.
Okay.
This
is the program switching over.
Yes.
But no, I think that's a very important thing to bring up, is that making sure that the tones fit the vibe of the songs, kind of having that producer's ear to know that, like a clean bass sound doesn't really give it the oomph or the saturation or the like vibe that you're looking for the track.
Yeah. And honestly, it's something that for me, so this album that I'm working on right now, I'm basically playing bass on all of it because I like playing bass a lot. And normally I'm doing live sessions where I can only play guitar at once. I can't play guitar and bass at the same time. And I'm around a lot of amazing bass players. So that's cool and that's great. But for this, I'm doing all this stuff from my house. So
as a bass player on an album, and for me to be like, this is the album where I played the bass as an artist, I really have to get over the sound of the bass when I isolate it. And other bass players, like, don't listen to it on its own unless there's something like particular that you're listening for. Oh, like, was I squeaking out on that note? Or like, was I,
Right.
that note, is the pitch, is there something weird with the pitch? Whatever. With bass, it's something, and actually with most things, it's always best to shape, in my opinion, shape the tone in the context of the song, because
Yep.
all of a sudden, oh man, there's no fatness to the bass here. It's like, well, yeah, because we carved it out. You know, we boosted the bass around 100 to 300 hertz and carved that out of the kick drum, but carved the 60 hertz out of the bass guitar and boosted that in the kick drum. So each one kind of lives in its own space and doesn't get in each other's way. And that's something for me when I'm mixing and when I'm listening to albums, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's the frequency spectrum? What's the space that really helps the kick drum to sing on this tune? What's the frequency space and spectrum where the bass guitar can really sing? And should there be those frequencies in the other instruments? For me as a guitar player, I'm like, don't squash out my sound, man. Don't cut all the stuff under 125 hertz.
Right.
But then when I'm mixing my own stuff, it's like, no, that stuff's in the way. I clean some of that up. And then you start to get it. So when I isolate my guitar tone on certain things, it's like, yeah, that's why, like, for me, when I pull up my Archetype plugin, it's the sound that I want.
Yes.
And then I put up an EQ afterwards to make it fit within the track, to make it, to help form the thing in the track. So for a lot of, basically in the same way where a guitar player would get their tone in their amp in the room, and then the engineer, mixer, producer, people are going to be putting up EQs or compressors to shape that tone. That's a similar way that I approach using plugins like this for recording at home. For basically any plugin use is get the sound that you want, and then afterwards, if you need to do a little shaping from there, fine. Or if you know ahead of time, like if you know ahead of time that there's going to be too much 20 hertz in the bass, pull it down or whatever. If it's like, in general, I don't even want the option for there to be much 2K to 6K in the bass tone. I want it to be that kind of, a little more of a muffled thing.
Sure.
You know, a lot of times you need to tame that sort of thing with a J bass. Like with my jazz bass, it's got a lot more snap to it. So one thing that I like doing in the Archetype plugin is going to that graphic EQ, pulling down some of those frequencies and saving those then. Like, this is for my specific jazz bass. These are the EQ settings. And then they're just my own user presets. When I use this bass, it does this thing. When I have Sonny T play on my albums, his Warwick bass somehow has so many more low and high frequencies that you didn't even think existed on a guitar, on a bass guitar, but they just do. And it's not like a scooped sort of thing. It's just like, oh my gosh, how is there that much low end and high end? And how does it work? Like that would be the first thing I would remove. But for some reason on his Dolphin bass, it just works incredibly. And most of that has to do with the way that he plays and the way that he makes it do its thing. But if I know, okay, here's the Sonny T EQ settings to kind of tame what I'm looking for on this, or here's on my Dart bass, if it's a little too mid-rangey, or if I want to scoop the mid-range a little bit to make it sound a little more like a J bass,
right?
Then I have that setting. So it's like Dart bass, or it's just like, Dart bass, jazz bass, EQ or something. So it kind of scoops it a little bit to make it, to lean the tone a little more towards a jazz bass sound and that sort of thing. So in a second here, I'm going to show you a tune that I've been working on that I played bass on. This one, when I solo the bass, it sounds so clicky and it sounds not amazing, but the percussiveness of it, the transients of it are what needs to be there because of the way that the bass pops through. So this is a tune where I went back and forth between fingers and slap,
Okay.
And of course, with the slap, you got a lot more like, and the pops, you have another
Right.
thing. So the slaps are normally a higher frequency spectrum than the pops. So it's like slap, really high, pop, high mids, and then the finger stuff is all just the regular mids. So
Sure.
when I'm EQing that, I need to kind of keep those things in mind. But a lot of times the compressor will catch that sort of thing. So in this one, I use the pedal compressor in the Archetype plugin. So let's move over. I'll play a little bit of it in context. I'll solo it out, and I'll go back and forth. I'll play some of the sections where there's finger bass, slap bass, in context, and soloed out. So this is my peace sign telling you, let's switch.
Yes.
On your mind.
All right. You hear me?
Yeah.
Did you hear the song? Did it work?
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm listening to both versions because I have to listen to the Zoom and listen to, but
Oh, that sounds like garbage, I'm sure.
it's an experience. but no, that sounded, from what I heard and what I could tell, like, that sounded really, really awesome as far as like having the bass like have that nice sort of growl and saturation, kind of makes it like a little more mid forward and kind of stand out a little bit among like the rest of the mix. Like it doesn't sit back. It's fairly aggressive, which I like, especially for that track.
Yeah, for that tune, it's kind of Prince Batman era is what I'm thinking. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking Prince Batman with a little bit of the Marcus Miller thing. And with that sort of thing, what I have to use with the J bass, it's already got a little the scooped thing, but I'm adding a little more of an aggressiveness to it because that's just how it has to be to fit in the mix and to stand out in the mix a little more. So
yes.
I'm carving out not a lot. I'm basically doing a high pass at 40 hertz, which a lot of other bass players don't like when you take out their ultra low end. But for me, it's like, there's enough of that in the kick drum.
If you want to screen share, you can go to the Zoom portal, the Zoom screen, and at the very bottom it says screen share. You can do that to share your screen if you wanted to show what you got going on in your session and the plugin.
Got it. It's not working for some reason. I think it's this version of Zoom that I have. Let me try.
That's so strange. Advance so all participants can share.
Let me.
Who can start sharing with someone
Right.
else?
We're switching over there. Yeah, and it's the same sort of thing. Like, I'm gonna try a different session. I think the session is like it's like locking up my computer on something. Hold on.
Well, what are some issues that you find you run into when mixing bass? Like, what are some of the things that you tend to like look for and troubleshoot at the outset? Like you mentioned earlier that you like to make sure you dial in tones in the context of the mix, which I'm wholly for, and that's something that I recommend to anybody who will listen and who wants to try and be a mixer. But what are some things that you find you run into on the regular?
As far as problems with a bass,
Yeah, or things that you attend to, like things that are important while you're mixing, either that your plugins solve or something that you try to pay attention to.
well, the first and foremost, are the parts meshing. So the producer side of things goes before. That's the first plugin, is having good parts.
Yes.
And unfortunately, you can't just throw that as an insert.
Good parts and a good player. They make all the difference.
A good feel and all that. Time, feel, both, groove, which are different things. The main things that I'm looking at is transient response, because I'm a rhythmic player, and as a rhythm guitar player, I'm always thinking about how transients are lining up. So there's that sort of thing. But then, like I was saying before, it's the kick drum bass guitar relationship. And a lot of people know about this. Anybody who's worked on mixing music knows that that is one of the more important roles. Like, I'll solo out the drums, solo out the bass, and just make sure they're sitting with each other. Because a lot of times you have something ringing out in the drums that almost sounds like, oh, is that something that bass is doing? You know, like if it's a floor tom that always has too much tone, or if the kick has too much tone, what I like to do is get the transient and let that die down. Sometimes in the bass, it's actually the opposite, where I'm going to let the kick drum be the transient and the bass be more the sustain. And a lot of people will do a side chain compression thing where it's triggered by whenever the kick drum hits, it triggers a compressor on the bass guitar track to dip down. I don't necessarily do that. Partially because, well, I'm not against it. I'm not necessarily for it. I just don't really do it a lot. But for me, it's the transient, and then it's the relationship between what frequencies are sticking out. So for me, my taste is to have a little more of the Rocco Jocko sort of bass tone in my music, because I'm okay having a little more of that mid-rangey thing and don't need the super sub-bassy thing from the bass guitar. Although some tracks, I do like that. So I'll adjust that sort of thing, because I like a little more of the punch of the low end to come from the kick drum, especially because a lot of times in my music and the type of music that I play, there's a lot more action happening on the bass. And if you're at the club and you just hear on a funk song, it's like, why? It's, you know, all of a sudden you're getting confused on whether you're hearing a double kick pedal, which, you know, the right genre requires that. And that sort of thing happens. But if you're doing the and that's taking up the 40 to 60 hertz range, you're just hearing in your subwoofer, and then everything is muddied up. So for me, in the type of music that I play and the type of stuff that I do, if I have a bass part that's more active, I will focus the frequency range of the instrument to be more in the 100 to 500 hertz range, and let the kicks be the thing that gives you the more power. Because I like those. I like to feel the sub, but I like to be able to take a breath between it. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right.
So if the bass guitar is always giving the and it's just a constant hitting my chest, you know, from the sub, it just gets to be overwhelming. It gets to be too much. So
Yeah.
somebody could try doing that and it might be cool for a second, but if you're thinking about the listener, it's going to get overwhelming. And
Yes.
also, if you think about the context in which most people are listening to music nowadays, it's not typically on the greatest sound systems in the world, although it needs to sound great and have clarity and sound amazing on the greatest sound systems in the world. But it also just needs to work on these, you know, like it's got to sound good in iPhone buds and it's got to sound good on an iPhone speaker. And it should sound good on the majority of just over the ear headphones, kind of your over the counter, you know, Skull Candy, Bose, JBL, you know, all of those different things that just standard consumer products, which are great. Because of that, you have to keep those things in mind when you're mixing. How is this going to translate to how is this going to translate to the masses? And if you listen to a lot of people's like bass players have it tough on Instagram, man, because when you're scrolling through your phone, the guitar, the frequencies just work out of this speaker. But the bass guitar, like, man, this just isn't translating the same as when you're listening to it in your Mark Bass 8x10 or on your, you know, gigantic studio monitors. So you compromise to make it sound good on the phone speaker and also maintain its integrity on a wonderful sound system. That is the balancing act of mixing bass guitar.
Yeah, I love that you reference the Instagram players because, yeah, generally whenever I'm flipping through Instagram, I pull up a bass player and all I hear is the string snaps. I'm like, okay, just gonna scroll right on past.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a painful world for them for sure. I do have a couple of user questions that are pretty interesting. Rega asks, can the plugin be used for other stuff? Compression for drum bus, maybe? What are some instances that you've used your plugin for perhaps unconventional uses?
Yeah, I will. Can I do it? Yeah. I can play some things. So let me pull up a session here. Songs from mixing. What was that? I actually sleeper. This plugin is a sleeper for the use on saxophones and horns.
Ooh.
Check this out, dude. Where am I at here? Okay, so I am producing the new Dave Koz album.
Okay.
He's a saxophone player for people unfamiliar, and he's been known in like the smooth jazz world, right? Like he's famous in the smooth jazz world. He's like the sultan of the smooth jazz world, right? And he wants to try to do a new thing, get a new sound, and he's really open to a lot of things. So we recorded this tune. I was like, Dave, I have just the plugin for your saxophone on this solo. And it's kind of this Barry sax and alto sax duet that's happening. Okay. And it was like this kind of aggressive thing, but without the plugin, the Barry sax has such a huge guttural sound and the alto sax is much more nasally. And I was trying to find something to kind of to give them a little more of an equal thing. And what was fun is I threw on my plugin for the amp sound just to give it a drive, and it immediately made the Barry sax bark a lot more. But all of a sudden, the alto sax started to sound a little more like a harmonica. I was like,
wow.
Whoa, this is really cool. And then I throw on the postal service, the envelope filter, and it brings it into a completely new space. So I'm going to show you. I have this session open. I'm going to see if this works. This is going to be. Oh yeah, let me see if this screen share thing will work. Pardon any notifications that pop up. Okay, my options are desktop. Oh, I can do. Oh, screw it. I'm just going to do my whole desktop. Right? Is this working?
Sure. That's perfect. We now see your desktop. Yep, we see your desktop. I can't see you, by the way, but we do see your desktop.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to show you. So what we have is there's this tune. I'm going to explain what's happening. You can see my mouse right now? Okay.
Yes.
There's a Barry saxophone right here. And then underneath it, I basically just duplicated the track. Sorry, I'm going to turn groups off. I duplicated the track and put the archetype on. Check out all this action. Just flipping pedalboard central, right? Look at
Yes.
these settings.
It's beautiful.
Come at me with this big rig overdrive. Okay? Going through the amp snob. Just pretty much default stuff, right? Well, yeah, I did turn a little bit of the wash on. But mostly what's happening is it's running through the amp and the pedals. So I did the same thing for Dave. I took the cause. I had 2 microphones on his alto. I just duplicated that track here. You can see I stripped the silence. Whenever he wasn't playing, there's just drum bleed. So I took that out. I left that in the regular microphones, but I took it out of the amp because the amp makes it do, like the drum bleed, do some crazy stuff because we were all in the same room. Same exact settings as the Barry sax one on Dave's alto sax. So what I'm going to do, just because I can't talk to you while I'm doing it, I'm going to play just some of the Barry sax on its own. Then I'll show you the archetype. Then I'll show you fully in context. Then I'll show you with the stuff off, and I'll just kind of rifle things on and off so
Okay.
you can see what I'm doing.
Perfect.
Let's switch over.
All right. All right.
All right, we're back. You hear my voice now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so sorry I can't talk to you while I'm doing that. I really wish I could.
It's all good. It's all good.
So you hear there the Barry sax on its own blended with the archetype sound. Gives it that, just gives it this, it just makes it feel so much more aggressive. And same with the alto sax. But what it does is it kind of makes it so, because the Barry is such a low instrument and it's got such a full thing, and the alto, it just sounds off balance with them trading on their own. I mean, of course I can make it work and I can EQ it and compress it the right way. But what's fun about that is that I can just get a different vibe. I can get a different sound happening there by using these different effects. So the amp on its own sounds cool. It just adds some grit and some drive to it. and then turning on the big rig gives the clon sort of thing on a Barry sax, which you're not used to hearing, which is cool. And then the tuber gives the tube screamer thing. The compressor on it just kind of gives it more, like it just puts it all right in your face. But the envelope filter just gives it this different, it affects the transients and the like kind of the wah sort of thing of it in a completely different way. So it's really fun.
Yeah, absolutely. To add on to that, I've used your plugin now for, I made a fake room track. Some drummer sent me some files for the John Mayer cover that just went up on the channel, but he didn't have a room mic. So I ended up sending all my shells to an aux, and I used the Archetype Cory Wong to create my own room track for like space, and added like roomy goodness, a little distortion, a little bit of saturation. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I've actually been thinking about using the DI Funk console, since it's essentially a channel strip. I've been thinking about using that as like my only tool to do a full mix on. I've been really, really like intrigued to try and challenge myself to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun thing. I mean, the compressor on it works a little bit differently. Just the funk console on its own, but because that just emulates the console compressor, like the one knob sort of thing.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to think through how I would step up to that challenge. But because you have the pedal compressor with the blend knob, that to me is the thing. Like, especially with bass guitar and electric guitar, I like to be able to compress the stuff, but also have it act like a parallel compressor, which it is.
Absolutely.
Where you have half of the dry sound, half of the compressed sound, which is really fun.
Yeah, I completely agree. That was actually my thought exactly, using that as a parallel compressor. Leave some of the dynamics, but still enable to enforce the sound that you're sending through it. Yeah, it's super versatile. So that's been something I've been playing around with in my head. Like, should I do like a live stream or make a 20-minute video of like cut down the highlights of a full mix with it? So I've been thinking about that.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. We got another question. Strings of Chaos is asking, "Hey Cory, I was wondering if you could tell us who some of your musical influences are." I love the plugin, dude. I might even add on to that, who were some of your bass influences, since we're talking about bass on this particular live stream.
Yeah, for me, as far as the bass goes, Prince Batman album, dude. And I grew up in Minneapolis, and Sonny T is just like the king. He played on a lot of Prince's stuff. He's played on a ton of different records. Played with James Brown. He's on like Mariah Carey, Jonas Brothers, all kinds of things. But Sonny is just this insane bass player who happens to be a good friend of mine also now, after just working together. Flea is a huge influence. I'm a Chili Peppers fanatic. When I was in 7th grade, I had the guitar and bass tab books for One Hot Minute and Blood Sugar Sex Magic. And I made it it was my goal to learn note for note every song on both of those albums on bass and on guitar. And it took me a long time to do as a 7th grader, but that to me I learned so much from that experience. And also some of the other obvious ones like Pino Palladino. Yeah, I'll leave it there because that's plenty.
Those are pretty solid. I mean, I feel like Flea, Red Hot Chili Peppers, maybe even Primus, like those are like the two dudes that brought like slap bass to like the rock genres, and really kind of popularized it for a lot of like rock musicians.
Yeah. I mean, Louis Johnson, I'll keep going. Louis Johnson, as far as the slap thing, and Marcus Miller. That to me, those are my two favorite slap players, Marcus Miller and Louis Johnson. And I think those somewhere in between those two tones is what I like for a slap tone. Sometimes Marcus's stuff is a little too scooped for me. Louis Johnson, much more the vintage thing. My preference is somewhere in between the two. Whatever. We all have our own preference, right?
Right.
Rocco Prestia. I mean, that sort of that sort of thing is so fun to me. And that again is a prime example of you can't have too much happening below 100 hertz because
Right.
it's just going to feel like, it's like it would actually be a fun experiment is like give Rocco that, have him play in Meshuggah or something. Like, have the bass player do the double kick stuff. Maybe I'll experiment and try something like that. That'd be fun.
Yeah, man. That sounds like I'm down for it. Who are some of your go-to bass players today? Some people that you are working with currently or that you want to work with?
Yeah. Well, with Vulfpeck and Fearless Flyers, obviously it's Joe Dart. He's the king, dude. He's our
Yes.
generation's cat. He's amazing. He's so great. Just the greatest bass player. And I would say him and Sonny T are my favorite bass players around. And I fortunately get to play with those guys all the time, and that's really fun. There's a cat out of the UK named Seth Tackerberry who I play with quite a bit. Incredible. He's like 21. Just he's got all the stuff happening. He's insane. He's played on some of my stuff before. He's on a couple of my live albums because he's toured with me, and he's played on some of my studio stuff as well. I love playing with Tim Lefebvre. He's incredible. His notes are just fat and huge. I don't know how, but like he'll just play on a tune and it just feels so much bigger. The same rig, the same notes, but for whatever reason, when he plays them, they just feel bigger, fatter. I don't know how or what he's got going on, but it's one of those things that he's got that touch. One of my all-time favorite bands is Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, so Victor Wooten would be so fun to work with. He came to my Boston show when I was in Boston this last tour, and it was fun to hang with him afterwards and incredibly inspiring to just hear his encouragement and just how into the music he was. It was really fun. And for me, it was special for me to be able to thank him because when I saw Bela Fleck and the Flecktones as a teenager, it was one of those moments that like I felt like it gave me permission to do this kind of music for a living. It's like,
Yes.
oh, this is what these guys do? This is what I want to do. You mean you can do this for real? Oh, okay, cool. And yeah, that was really fun.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, Victor Wooten seems like such a very positive individual. And everything I've seen him work on or talk about, like he just seems like a very, very positive and like uplifting individual, and seems like he just really truly enjoys what he's doing.
Yeah, he's so good. He's so great. And I mean, come on, Paul McCartney?
Of course.
McCartney? Come on. Speaking of McCartney, I'm going to show you another tune of mine
Great.
that I used a McCartney. I use a Hofner bass, and just because that's a different thing, man. The McCartney bass is its own thing. So I don't own one, but a friend of mine, John Fields, has one in his studio, and I was cutting some bass. We used the Archetype for the bass tone. This was when it was in beta. So this is like pre-released plugin.
Pre-launch. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, launch. So I'm going to see if this screen share will work again. I'll play through some of this tune. I'll isolate the bass. It's pretty simple. It's kind of this sort of technique where I go, I'm palm muting, and I'm just going thumb. That sort of thing throughout. I don't have it plugged in, but it's just kind of muted, thumb hitting, keeping everything pretty light. You'll hear it in the track. When you see Pro Tools go up, you can shift the audio over to it.
Sounds good.
hear that all right?
Yeah. Yep. Sounded great.
So one of the things that you notice there in the bass track with those Hofner basses is it's microphonic and you hear some drum bleed in there. I'm sitting in the same room as the drummer. You don't normally get that on most pickups, but with those pickups and the hollow body, there's a little bit of drum bleed, which is kind of fun. It's interesting. So, you know, you got to be on your game. If you're tracking live in the room together, it's fun. A little less editing possibilities, but I like that.
Yes.
I like that about it. Yeah. So that's using the McCartney bass, and for me, that just has a more tame, vintage feel. As far it's less of a fat vintage, like the P bass to me is the fat vintage thing. The McCartney bass just has a little more of that hollow body sort of thing. You know, it's nice.
How often are you recording in person with like bands like in the same room rather than overdubbing everything? That I'm kind of curious that you mentioned that.
The majority of my sessions are in person, but the last 6 months I've done 2 of them. So there's one project that I had in mind, a big video project that of an album of mine that was supposed to be the only album I recorded this year. I haven't even put it out yet, but I've recorded it. That I'm going to push till next year, just for timing. But that was supposed to be recorded in April. We pushed it a month. There was just too many people involved. There was like 25, 30 people between all the crew and all the people, and just there's a lot of people, a lot involved. So we ended up basically everybody getting tested, forming a bubble, temperature checks every day, testing all the whole thing, and formed a bubble, and we're able to do an in-person session about a month and a half ago. And then this Dave Koz album that I was showing you a little snippet of, that one was the only other one that I did in person. That was 10 person band. And again, you know, taking all the precautions and doing the thing. So normally I would do all my sessions in person, but I've been doing so much in this little room the last 6 months. I just show up to work. I work. Whatever I get done, I get done. And apparently it's been a lot, which has been fun. Kind of sit down and focused thing.
Yeah, you seem like a very productive person.
I don't know. Like, I feel like I am. Once I have my head around a project, then so there's like conceptual, creative Cory, and then there's logistics, execution Cory, and that's a constant teeter-totter.
Right. Do you find that that's difficult?
They play nice with each other.
Yeah, well, do you find it's difficult to balance the two? Like, do you get overwhelmed by one aspect? Like, if things get piled on with logistics, does the creative kind of take a backseat?
I was about to say, fortunately, they play nice together, these two Corys, and they both understand. Like, I understand when it's time. I don't want to refer to myself in a split personality because I don't have that. But when I have those two sides of my brain, they both understand each side. So when I'm in creative mode, I also understand that there's a logistical and an execution thing that needs to take place. And when I'm in logistical execution mode, I do understand that there's a creative process that also needs to be respected and valued. So because of that, that's actually why I think I'm able to get a lot done, because I kind of do both of those at once. And also, I have a lot of great people around me that I work with. So that helps, you know, on the personal side and on the work side.
Absolutely. Yeah. Having that support system is super important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but most of my sessions, like Fearless Flyers, everything's all recorded in one room. We did Sound City, everything was direct. We had little amps in the room just because we needed a little bit of monitoring. Same thing with Vulfpeck. Everything's all live in the room. And I normally do my sessions live in the room, but I use headphones. That's the difference between what I do and with Vulfpeck. With Vulfpeck, it's just like just above speaking volume playing by each person. No headphones. We're all just relying on the room sound, which is really fun. It's cool, but it poses different challenges. And when I do my stuff, I use headphones most of the time because I'm also going direct and I don't have an amp in the room.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
We've had a couple of people ask about if you want to break down the Cosmic Sans bass tone and production.
Yeah. That one is a combination of keyboard bass. It's the rifle through. It is the Logic preset. If you go bass, it's a software instrument, bass, synth bass, basement bass. Pull up that preset. I use that all the time. That's my go-to synth bass. And I put a little bit of a drive on it to give it a little thing. Somebody said keyboard bass on Cosmic Sans. No, only on part of it. The rest is on my jazz bass. So in the chorus, in the part where it's G, that's keyboard bass. The rest of it is all electric bass. Let me see if I can. Let me do one last ditch effort on making this sound work. Let me see if this will work zoom wise. I don't know if this is. Can you hear that?
Yeah, we can hear that.
Like, does it sound okay or does it just sound terrible?
It sounds okay. It sounds like it's in a room.
Okay, I'll break down the Cosmic Sans bass thing. So I'm going to turn my microphone down when I play the bass. So the thing in G, that's this sort of thing. I went to the wrong chord at the end there. That is synth bass. The rest of it is just this J bass. And that sound is my just this jazz bass direct into my Apollo going through a SSL channel strip and a compressor, which is basically like the DI Funk console thing. So anybody who plays guitar, there's a couple presets that I made that are Cosmic Sans Tom, Cosmic Sans Cory. It's our tones from that song. It's a song of mine for anybody that doesn't know. My guitar is just a clean electric thing, a little more compressed than normal. Interesting. It's one of my go-tos for my clean sound. I actually use that patch a lot when I'm tracking for other people now, just the Cosmic Sans Cory, because it's just it's more finished sound of my sound. And Tom's thing is more of the envelope filter thing. But the bass sound on it, it's all my knobs all the way up. Let me see if I'm messing this up now. And I'll just play it for you so you can see. So it's basically, it's just an SSL channel strip thing with the compressor a little bit on. But I should probably have it more on. I don't know, because in the end it goes through the master bus and the master bus has compression on it. So how about that? I'm going to mute this a little bit. I don't remember the exact line from that song. I have not played that song on bass maybe since I recorded it. But I had 10 seconds to practice it when I picked this up, so I'll play a little bit. That's the spot where it goes to synth bass. And then yeah, that's it. That's the tone. It's just this jazz bass, all the knobs all the way up. SSL channel strip kind of pulling out. It's giving a little, rounding the tone out a little bit, boosting a little bit around 100 hertz, cutting below 50 hertz, and then the compressor on it a little bit. That's all.
Beautiful.
Great.
Just super simple. I like it.
Yeah.
Some of the best tones needs so little work.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so let's, it's about 3:20 right now on my time. So why don't we just go ahead and put in for our last questions. If you have any questions, put them in the chat. Make sure it is bracket Q bracket, so that way we can pick it out from the regular chat. Let's see. We have.
I see a funny question.
Go for
I see
it.
a funny question. I need to know, Cory, how much did you pay the old guy behind the counter in the Golden Music video? That's funny. That's a funny question. The old guy is an actor in LA who the director Ben Cady hired. I did not get into the minutia of day rates on that. I had a music video rate, and I let him and the producer of the video portion of that figure out how to divvy up that amount. So whatever that guy's day rate was, that's what he got paid. Fun
Perfect.
cat. He's also in some stuff coming up that I got. I'll just leave it there.
Sick.
Great
Awesome.
dude.
Harry Walker is asking, how did you start out writing funk songs? I've been trying for months now, but everything seems to get messy and lost, chords or melody/riff.
I think start by just creating parts that are hooks. Think of 2 sections. This would be my just like challenge for you. It's my assignment for you. A section, B section. What's the groove? And the rhythm section thing. What's the drum groove? What's a bass part that matches it? And does the bass part feel kind of like a hook? Then come up with a guitar part that feels like it goes along with that. Is it something that needs to double the part? Maybe one of the guitars does that. I do that a lot. Double a bass part. And then the other one, maybe a rhythmic sort of thing, filling the role of like a bongo or congos, but with pitches. And what are the keyboards doing? If there's keyboards, are they doing more of the soaring, padding sort of thing? Or are they also contributing to the rhythmic thing? If the keyboards, guitars, and bass and drums are all doing really rhythmic stuff, it has the potential to sound very messy. So you just got to come up with parts that complement each other. Think about arranging, orchestrate the parts to work with and for each other. And then do the same thing for a B section and keep it simple. Sometimes it's just one chord. But I think the important thing is that you're just finding things that feel like hooks. And then you can write stuff on top of it. Or the rhythm guitar part, if it is a hook, can be just the hook. And you can leave it there. A lot of times it's less stuff than you think in a track. But the other thing is just study your favorite bands and what their specific parts are. And not just like, I'm a guitar player, I'm going to study the guitar part. How does that guitar part fit within the context? Does it weave in and out of the vocal? Does it fit with what the hi-hat is doing? Is it going along with the bass? Is it going along with the keys? What's everybody's role individually, but also how do they function within the whole of the project, whole of the song?
Right. I think that's really solid advice. I would add, just listen to, as Cory said, you come up with a riff, you come up with a melody line, and then you start adding elements to the production. Just keep your ears open to see, ask yourself if what you're adding right now is taking away from or adding to the overall feel and the vibe of the track. A lot of it comes down to just the producer's ear and deciding whether elements stay or go.
Yeah, totally.
Let's see. Jose Gravito is asking, what is one of the main things to avoid or to get the best bass tones? I record a lot of covers, but sometimes they sound too muddy.
Well, I think just play around with EQ. Record yourself playing, and then figure out names. It doesn't matter if they're the same things that other people use, but what is muddy? Find out what muddy is to you. Is that, to me, I'm thinking, okay, is that going to be more like 80 to 250 hertz? I don't know. What do you think, Steven? Is that probably what, like, for most people, 80 to 300 hertz? I mean, that's a pretty wide spectrum, but I think somewhere in there.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on a lot of the style that he's going for and the different covers, but I find that one area that I scoop sometimes, especially if I'm playing like metal or something like that, it's like 350, 300 hertz, kind of like not a super wide cue, but usually I kind of duck that place down so that way the guitars and the bass can kind of like get along with each other. That tends to get a little bit of the muddiness out, as well as like I find that the fundamental of the bass sits between 80 hertz and 120 hertz. 120 is where like the snare to me kind of lives, like the body of the snare, like the main note. So as long as you make sure that that area of the bass is clean, compressed, and present within your mix, that usually solves kind of the muddiness issues.
Yeah, and I think for Jose, what you should do is, yeah, like I'm saying, record the thing, boost 100 hertz, boost 300 hertz. It's like, oh my gosh, that's so much more muddy. There you go. Carve that out a little bit. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a plugin to do it, get the Archetype Cory Wong and use the graphic EQ. How about that?
There you go.
There's a graphic EQ there where it's just like, pull this one up or down. Okay. See if it sounds better or worse to you, and then just adjust until it feels right. And like I was saying earlier in this, a lot of times there's so much sonic information happening between 100 and 600 hertz that everybody's just got to, in some instruments, you got to carve out to be able to make space for the other ones. This instrument, you might carve a little 100 hertz, and then in the other one, you're going to boost that a little bit. So that way, you know, you're kind of doing this sort of thing with each other's EQs to make them work with each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see. Spencer's asking, what is your process to set up sound for live shows? I saw you last March in Phoenix, and I really remember the incredible sound for a live performance.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for being at the show, Spencer. Well, part of it is starting out of the gate, having clean sounds from everybody on stage. I try not to have too loud of a stage volume. So that way in a room like we were playing in Phoenix, that was one of the smaller rooms on the tour. We had to be a little more controlled, and it was a lower ceiling. I think it was only a 12 foot ceiling or something in that room, as opposed to like 40 or 80, or I don't know, whatever. But nobody's got 80-foot ceilings. What am I talking about, right? There wouldn't be any. Yeah. Okay. I know nothing.
It's all right.
So being able to control some of my stage volume. So in a room like that, a club venue, my sound engineer can really shape a lot of the tone with the front of house system. And I have a great front of house engineer that comes out with me. He also is the person that we hire for Vulfpeck. He works with me on my tours and Fearless Flyers. And basically every room that we go into, he tunes the PA. So it gets it, like most sound engineers will tune a PA to get it to where they feel like it's a neutral place for where their ears are used to. And then he can adjust our stuff there. So a lot of times like, hey, this room's got a little bit extra this thing. Can you turn down the bass amp around this, whatever, in this room? And then it's all in the common good of, okay, because he needs to be able to bring more clarity in the front of house system where it's like, hey, your amp sounds a little bright tonight, just the way that the cement walls or something. So, I adjust a little bit. So the relationship I have with my front of house engineer really helps, and the fact that he cares and is really good, and the band really cares and has good clean tones coming off the stage, that helps a lot.
Yeah, that's super solid. Each room's going to have its own acoustics. Like when you, what was it? I think Tool on their most recent album went to like, actually recorded the album in several different studios, but because the acoustics and the vibe of the room didn't work, they just scrapped the entire album, went to different studios. Like,
Wow.
yeah, it matters, you know, especially in a live set, live setting. You can't control, like, people don't have, you know, acoustic panels on the walls or whatever, so you're gonna have like slapback, you're gonna have elements that are not gonna be, you know, in your control. So yeah, having that really solid front of house relationship is gonna be really, really key.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, and then it's just size of venue. I did a really embarrassing thing. I've never told anybody this, but when we headlined at Madison Square Garden, we did changeover from the Fearless Flyers, which I'm the guitar player of. We had one set up there. We had to unplug my pedal board, plug it back in for Vulfpeck, because I had to move positions. I moved back. My pedal board goes back a little bit, right? When it gets plugged back in, the Strymon Big Sky automatically defaults to being on, or at least mine does. I don't know. Maybe I could turn that off. Somebody tell me how. But the Big Sky defaults to being on. So the first 3 songs of the Madison Square Garden gig, my reverb is just full on. But I couldn't tell because the room had so much. It was like, there is so much reverb in this room. I didn't even know that I couldn't really hear until I looked down. I was like, oh my gosh, my reverb's on? I turned it off, and I could barely even tell the difference because there's so much reflection happening in the room, and there's so much room noise on that. So if I was playing in a club and my reverb was on, everybody in the room would be like, wow, why is Cory's tone just completely soaked right now? And whatever it is, but I don't know. So the room matters, and different things are going to feel more or less dry or wet or saturated or bright or mid-rangey, depending on the acoustics of the room. So you can't just say, these are my settings, this is what I do. It's like, you got to be a little bit, you got to be aware of what's happening around you.
Absolutely. Epic Guy asks, what band's artist are you listening to that is perhaps antithetical to the perceived Cory Wong sound?
Huh.
Some Meshuggah, you know?
I'm down, dude. I'm a 90s alt rock kid. I love 90s alt rock. I'm always listening to 90s alt rock. So there's that. Like, would anybody think that I would belong in Weezer or the Foo Fighters? I don't know if it's antithetical, but I love 90s alt rock, and I'm super into that. I love pop music, and people might not think that fits, but I don't know. Maybe it's not. That's actually maybe fits closer to my sound than a lot of 90s alt rock, but you know, whatever. And on the road, you'd be surprised at how much we have watched some call it a documentary. I prefer the term expose, that is some kind of monster. And
I haven't watched that one yet.
Dude, you got to see it. It's amazing. So then we end up listening to a lot of Metallica. Oh, and I love Dave Matthews Band. I do listen to a lot of Dave Matthews Band.
Solid.
College Cory coming back out.
Let's see. Evab. I'm going to guess that's how it's pronounced. Evab's asking, any chance we'll see a Dave Koz, Cory Wong collaboration that jumps into ska's 4th wave that is starting to take off?
That'd be pretty fun, wouldn't it?
Yes.
See, I'm already getting behind the curve here. I got speaking of curve soprano. We could work that in. That's what Dave plays. He plays this tiny curved soprano. He looks like a dinosaur when he plays it, because it's this. Somehow he like manages to look cool playing a curved soprano. It's pretty awesome. anyways, yeah, I'm down. I loved ska growing up. I had a ska band, a punk band. One of my favorite, actually, Real Big Fish, Less Than Jake, Five Iron Frenzy.
I love Five Iron Frenzy.
It's a lot of my stomping grounds. Learning how to play the guitar. So I'm in to start a ska band. Somebody hit me up. Let's do it.
Amazing. Johannes asks, "Hey Cory, who's about to drop track 10 on JOM, JORE?"
Yeah.
Yeah, is it playing an epic 3-minute? Yeah. Is it you playing an epic 3-minute bass solo?
I am not the highest bidder on the track 10. For anybody who doesn't know, Vulfpeck auctioned off the real estate of track 10, the next album, The Joy of Music, The Job of Real Estate. I know who the person is that
Okay.
I did some deep digging on them. I'm curious to see what they're going to do. I'll just leave it at that. It's not me.
Okay. What are you? I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on that whole process. Like, it's not anything that I've ever heard a band doing, auctioning off a space on their album. Like,
that's Jack, man. Jack's brilliant.
like it's brilliant marketing, right? Like, I love it.
God,
I heard that they were doing it. I'm like, this is brilliant. This is great. Like, because all the bad press, all the good press, like, it's only just gonna push the agenda even more, and I love seeing it.
Jack is an internet whisperer. It's wonderful to see. He talked about the concept for a while, and I just can't believe that he actually did it. And I'm so stoked. And the thing, it's like, we're going to get a lot of backlash, whatever, this and that. You know, like you said, there's good press, there's bad press. But it's like, dude, how about we just take the money? Like, do it. Like, he did this thing called Dance Boy Dance, where Christmas Day, he like danced in front of a live stream for like 8 hours or something, and just had a ticker going, raising money for nobody knows what. Like, we're just paying this guy to dance in front of his camera. The next day, he just donates it all to Donors Choose for these music programs. And that's the thing that's really fun, is to see the haters come out, say, "Oh my God," you know, people are just waiting for bands to sell out. It feels like,
of course,
you're just on the cusp of having some career success, and it's like, now all of a sudden people, if you cross over to having success, people want to just be able to call you a sellout. I did that when I was a teenager too. There was bands that I wanted to call sellouts if they were like, "Oh, they're about to get big. I don't want everybody else to know about them. I want to be the one that knows about this band. It's my little secret." Whatever. I don't care. I don't have an opinion about that otherwise. But I think a lot of people that want to call a band a sellout, it's like, you do something like this, pull a marketing stunt like this, and then you donate the money to music programs around the country where, you know, Mr. Berger's class needed a new tuba, so they got a new tuba. And this class needed a bunch, like, you know, some iPads to do their whatever. It's like, how cool is that? I'll sell out any day of the week to be able to help do that. Fund music programs, that sort of thing. And Jack is brilliant in that way. He sees and he gets that. And he's always been the most generous and kind person when it comes to all that sort of stuff that I've known in the industry. I've never seen anybody run their business with so much just like transparency on all that stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah. I thought it was brilliant when I read it. I was really excited for it as well, just to see who would be the highest bidder. I think it's a great move. I think it's very, very, I don't know. I think some people aren't seeing it for what it is. I think they're only seeing the initial, like, hey, we're auctioning off time, you know, on the album, and they're not seeing what the end result is going to be. So they're just seeing like a sort of capitalistic sort of move, but not seeing the philanthropic aspect of it. So it is what it is. You know, I think it's great. I think it's going to be awesome. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and it wasn't pitched as that. That's why it's funny. It's pitched,
right?
You know, it was pitched as Jack's in a financial bind and he needs some money.
Yeah.
You know, which is why it's funny. Like that stuff's all great, and I'm so into it. I think it's really fun, and you know, whatever. Even if there wasn't the philanthropic side of it, it's just kind of a funny thing.
It's hilarious. I love it. So let's end on this question. I think this is good, and I might tack on a few things at the end. But Jack Schaefer's asking, I have a YouTube channel for playing bass. What tips do you have for me? I just use an interface and my bass. How can I improve my setup or my sound? I think I would ask, like, kind of add on to that, like, if you had to start your career over today, you know, making a YouTube channel, creating music, what are some of the more important aspects that you would want to pay attention to, or things that you know you would have to attend to at the outset?
I think there's two sides of it. And again, this is logistical Cory and creative Cory. There's normally two answers. The logistical side is, whatever you're doing, just make sure it sounds good and optimized for the thing that you're doing. In this case, playing bass. Like I talked about earlier, how are most people consuming this content that you're putting out? Is it on their iPhones? Is it on their YouTube app, on their smart TV? Is it on their laptop? Is it on their earbuds? Are they listening on some insane like Bowers and Wilkins speaker setup or something? Or, you know, like high level home hi-fi audio thing. Most people are not listening on a hi-fi audio thing, so you need to as far as bass, like we talked about, it's not ideal. The phone is not ideal to listen to bass guitar, but you can make it work. You just have to EQ it a little bit differently. You have to mix it a little bit differently. There's going to be some compromise you need to make to have it stand out sonically on phones, earbuds, and laptop speakers. And just that's going to take some experimenting on your end. I can't go into all the details of what your setup is. Find some good plugins, some EQ and compression that can really help it feel like it's up front in your face sort of thing. A lot of times you'll see videos that are really quiet. It's like, come on, just put on a compressor and a limiter so it's the same level as like, yeah, stand out. Make sure don't make me turn up my volume just so I can hear it. You know, you got me here. Keep me here. You know, and sometimes one of the things that people click away, it's like, it sounds weird. Something's off. And then they write it off immediately just because the sound's a little off. Now, that's maybe a little bit of the logistical side. The creative side would be, find something that's uniquely you. What is it that you do on the bass that other people don't do? Or what is your approach to playing the bass that's a little bit different than the people around that are also doing that thing? And I think the thing you need to be careful with that is just not to compare yourself too much to everybody else, but find what is the thing that you want to say as a person, as a musician, and as a bass player, and how can you best manifest your life's vision through your instrument. That's the tough thing to do, but that's the hardest part of it. But once you get it, that is immediately what's going to help you to be able to stand out.
Perfect. I think that's a great answer. I think it's a beautiful answer.
Cool.
Well, thank you all for hanging out in the chat, asking wonderful questions as always. Thank you, Cory, for a wonderful conversation. This was a lot of fun. Despite technical difficulties, I really enjoyed it. This is great. This is great. You know, it happens, you know, it is what it is. But yeah.
We're going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out for next time. And I'm going to log on to the Zoom link that you sent more than 10 minutes before our start time. So we have the time to figure it out. That's on me. My bad.
It's all good, man. It's all good. We got it going. People enjoyed their time here, so that's all that matters to me. So yeah.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This is really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people find you? Socials, Spotify, whatever. What's your links?
Yeah, I don't know. Just look up my name on whatever platform you're on, and I'm probably there. Spotify is a great place to check out my catalog, Cory Wong. And I'm also I'm on YouTube. Smash that subscribe button. That's what they say, right? And
Hit that
all the other-
notification bell.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Hit that. Oh, is that the new one?
Yeah.
Hit that notification
Smash
bell.
that subscribe and hit that notification bell. Yeah. No, I hate
Right.
saying it every time. It's awful.
Yeah, see, I got to step up my YouTube game a little bit. I just have not nurtured that thing, but I do feel like it's a fun way to connect and show. Like I started doing a couple mixing and production breakdowns on my YouTube channel that have been fun to do because I can express what's fun to me in a new and different way. It's fun
Yes.
to make albums, but it's also fun to talk about making albums. How about that? So I have
Yes.
this little YouTube stuff that it's just fun to be able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so everybody in chat, go check his stuff out. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and we will see you in that next video.
Peace.